Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. You may find a little bit less on Twitter these days. We're pushing most of our content to our Discord because that way we can communicate with Heat fans directly after we post it. Also, we do Q&As. We'll be doing more stage shows coming up as well. Our first one was a success. Had a lot of people on there with us. So check it out. Off the Floor, link right here in the description. $2.99 per month. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Streets of South Florida, there are potholes. You ever run over a pothole so hard that your steering wheel shakes? You got to reach out to U-Brake Wheel Fix. U-Brake Wheel Fix, with a U at the start, is Miami's premier wheel repair and restoration company. Over 20 years of experience, located in North Miami, to be specific, 1848 Northeast 143rd Street. U-Brake Wheel Fix offers quick repairs for damaged wheels, and in most cases can offer free loaner wheels to keep you on the road while repairing your damaged wheel. If your wheels are looking weathered, it's time to freshen up your car. Don't replace, refinish. They've got all the colors there. You can do the powder coating, the machining, the polishing to give your car the new look it deserves. So check it out. U-Brake Wheel Fix. Again, that's ubrakewheelfix.com, 305-748-0112. Mention 5 Reasons. You get a 5.5% discount off your next repair. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him by Brady Hawk 305. And Alex Toledo, you can follow at Tropical Blanket. I am here in the Bahamas in Nassau. I was actually at the first training camp practice today. Very quiet compared to past training camps. I remember being here after the Big Three won their second championship, 2013. There were a few more reporters. A bunch of reasons for this. The only reporters today actually there from the outside were myself, Anthony Chang from the Herald, Ira Winderman from the Sentinel, and Timothy Bain, also from 5 Reasons. So that's it. That's everybody that was there covering practice. You'll get more on a Tuesday practice in January in Miami than you got down here for training camp. One reason, cost. It was very expensive to stay at that particular hotel, which I'm not staying at. But additionally, the Sixers are here, and there's more interest in the Sixers locally with the Bahamian media than there is with the Heat. One, because Eric Gordon has Bahamian heritage. That's part of it. He was a signee of the Sixers this offseason. But also because there's a sense that they're more interesting. And just talking to reporters down here, like, well, the Heat really haven't done anything. So that's the perception. I guess the perception in the Bahamas is the same as it is in Bristol, Connecticut, because there just was not a lot of a buzz around this training camp. But I actually think that's the way the Heat like it. So today, again, we did get a chance to talk to some players. I spoke to Jaime Jaquez and Kevin Love on the side, so we'll be putting those in one of our podcasts. We're actually going to be posting special interview podcasts from Media Day and from the Bahamas. So here's some of the players you can expect to hear from. First one we're going to put together is Duncan Robinson with Haywood Highsmith. They weren't together, but we're going to put those together in a podcast. We also spoke to Nasir Little, Josh Christopher, Josh Richardson, Keyshawn Johnson with Pella Larson. That was a fun one. Kalel Ware, of course, first-round pick. We had about 20 minutes with Nikola Jovic, so we're posting that up. And then again, I spoke to Jaquez and Love today, and hopefully get to hear from Terry Rozier before I leave the Bahamas. So make sure you check out all of our interview podcasts. We appreciate the Heat for accommodating and providing players for those so that we can ask the questions that you guys want asked. But today, Jimmy Butler did meet with the media in a public session for about 3.5-4 minutes. I guess that's probably going to be the end of his availability in the Bahamas. That's my guess. Bam did not do a group interview today, so my guess is he's tomorrow or Tyler's tomorrow. And Jimmy kind of got it out of the way today, and he was in good spirits. Now, of course, he did acknowledge that he had planned a different hairdo for Media Day, but just didn't have time. So this is why I always say don't read into too many things with Jimmy. Everybody jumps to conclusions. First, he's late. He doesn't care. Then it was totally the opposite. he's stupidly locked in. He does care because he didn't do anything with his hair. So he's showing that he's serious. No, he was late because the flight from Paris was late. Yes, probably could have decided to come back a little sooner. Probably would have been smarter, but whatever. And as far as the hair, no, he just didn't have time because he said next year. So he did have something planned. So again, don't read into too much one way or the other. We're going to be saying that the entire season. But one thing he was asked about, I think Ira asked it, but it's something we've talked about on the podcast, is this idea of the Heat's best offensive players all operating in the same space. And this is why a team that has 4 potential 20-point scorers, guys who've scored that much in the past, still projects as a below-average offensive team. Because until they can figure this out on how to get guys to operate together in those spaces or to get more threes out of it or more pace or whatever it is that they need to do to generate more offense, they look to be a better defensive team than an offensive team because that's typically what they have been with this group. So we're going to play Jimmy's answer today from the press availability where he talks about all of these guys operating the same space. And again, credit to Ira for the question.
I think we're fine. I believe that even if we all end up in the same spot, don't nobody want to guard us anyways. So I think we got, the 4 guys that you just named can really put the ball in the basket at a high clip. We just got to figure out a way to do it together while playing high-level defense. All that other stuff will take care of itself.
All right. Now, let's start here. They've not been an elite offense with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, right? Is that fair to say, Alex? During their – now this is going to be 6th year together, but their first 5 seasons?
They haven't been elite. Yeah, it's not just fair. It's facts. They've only had 1 season, I think, in the top half in offensive rating, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, for sure.
Okay. And Brady, to follow on that, do you think that teams just don't want to guard them? Seems like a pretty strong statement from Jimmy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's the right phrasing. I mean, it's a Jimmy type comment. It's just like I don't know if he fully meant it like that. I think it's kind of him just talking like in general, just kind of like making a comment on it because they do have. I mean, they're 4 talented offensive scorers that you're putting together, and it's the whole conversation we're having is not if they're talented enough. It's if they can mesh well enough. And certain comments I thought yesterday led into that thinking that they're going to do everything in their power to do it. And I feel like some players are going to be probably fitting into roles around each other, but not wanting to guard them. I don't know. It feels like a lot of times teams are more worried when they have like 2 of their top 4 guys out than when they have all 4 playing, because that's when they seem to do most of their damage.
Okay. So Jimmy has this confidence about himself. He's always going to say, we're the best at this, we're the best at that. That's typically the direction he goes. But as he said yesterday, in response to a question that was really, related to a question of Erik Spoelstra, where he was told that Erik said that they needed each other. And Jimmy said, as I choke here, sorry about that. And Jimmy said, I need him more than he needs me. Is this really an Erik Spoelstra question, Alex? Like, is this – because I asked Erik today about what he's installing. And he's not going to tell me, right? Not flat out, not in a group interview. But he was very specific when the big 3 came in that he was only drilling defense at the beginning. That's it. They went to that Air Force base, and it was just defense. Because I think he was trying to set a tone with LeBron that this is what we're about, right? Mm-hmm. And they had a bunch of new players that they brought in. It was like just basically Chalmers and Haslam that came back, and Wade. So he was trying to, again, set that tone. And they didn't put much offense in during training camp. And then he acknowledged later that was probably a mistake because like halfway through the season, they were tripping over each other offensively until they got on that like win 21 out of 22 run and ended up getting to the finals before, LeBron, bleeped the bed at that point. But he has typically put in defense before offense. But today I asked him, and he said, actually, we're working. He says defense will always be a priority here, but he kind of suggested that they were leaning a little bit more offense early in camp. He says, but we're always going to try to defend. Is this on him now to figure this out, or is it more on the players who Jimmy and Bam played together a long time? Is it on them, at least starting with those 2, and then we'll get into how Tyler fits with this and Terry?
Honestly, I don't think it's one or the other. And I know it's going to sound like a cop-out answer and whatever. It's a tough question. It just is. Like, I think it's not one or the other because it's both. I think Spo, this is why he is paid as the best coach in the league, right? His track record, but his ability to, I think, be creative with guys and put guys in their best positions. We've seen it before. And I think the one season that I was referring to, the first season of the Jimmy era, some of that stuff was like surprising and teams weren't expecting that on the scouting report. When you think about like Duncan, right? Duncan was not a guy that teams ever had to worry about or like play against. He barely played before that season. Kendrick Nunn was new to that team. So like there was new layers to the offense. At this point in time, even though there's been, more changes to the roster than people want to say, like the main core guys are still there. And I think there's a certain level of that they know how to play with each other. But you've added these pieces ever since, right? With Terry, now with Jaquez, I think specifically, and then, maybe to a slightly lesser extent, Jovic, that you want to get more touches for, more usage for. And it's just a balancing act. And, I feel like I've harped on it a lot over the summer. And I asked some of the players about it yesterday as well. I just think this is the biggest question of the season is how do you balance out this offense? What is the hierarchy going to look like? Who's going to get the most usage? And, guys will probably be really close to each other when you compare it later on. I think that it'll be close to each other in usage and shot attempts won't be too far off from each other. And I think there's like, you want to ideally get it to be some sort of motion offense where the ball is always moving. You're able to get into the paint. You're able to draw to, and you just, the ball doesn't stop moving. I think that's ideally what you want. How do you get there, right? Like, what are you going to run more than other things? Because, like he talked about last season, they had their 3 different offensive philosophies. I felt like you saw those identities being changed throughout the season. They have to find what they want to do first and foremost, and then figure out the rest of the hierarchy for their offense from there. Because I think that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most, that change from the end of last season to this season. Is have you figured out any of that, or are they just kind of going back and forth? Like, are they going to do something in the beginning of the season and then kind of go away from it later on? That's what they did a lot of last season. But when you look at those 4 guys together, Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam, they only played 118 minutes. They had a 118 offensive rating in those minutes. And for the season, they were around 112 or 113. So they were, even with that, with very little adjustment time, doing that in the middle of the season, they were pretty good there. The problem was they had a 119 defensive rating. And that's much worse than what they're usually doing.
Well, so, Alex, let me ask you this specific to that. So you take those 4 guys. Are you able to crunch this on the fly here? If you take those 4 guys and plug in Jovic, what does that look like?
Together. They did not play a single together.
So that's right. The projected starting lineup for this team did not play a minute together last year. Well, why do you guys think? Because one of the reasons we're doing this now is that Spoelstra was so definitive at his opening presser, his media day presser, that we're gonna lean into this. We're gonna lean into these 4 players together. Like, he made it very clear at the start, which is why we said, like, Tyler won media day with the way that he spoke very maturely and clearly about his understanding of fitting in with a role in the team. But it also felt like he'd been reassured that he's going to be part of this this core group here. Okay. Yeah. Why do you think, Brady, that he was so definitive about it? Is it to just quiet the noise when it came to Tyler? Because now it feels like he's kind of stuck with seeing this through the end of training camp, at least.
A little bit. And I think there's a feel from him that he doesn't want to have the conversation of like needing to stagger. Because I think that's kind of the mindset is like, okay, if you have 4 guys, and kind of the question Jimmy was asked, if you have 4 guys that are operating kind of in a similar spot, we're going to have to play 2 and 2. We're going to have to split things up. We're going to have our role players carry kind of like they have in the past and kind of fill in these lineups. And I think his perspective is, well, we haven't seen these 4 guys on the floor long enough. I believe that we could kind of figure that out for long periods of time and they can play off each other. Now, the thing that Alex just mentioned, my take on the lineup with those 4 guys is that I think ultimately we're going to be talking about the defense more than the offense. I don't think the offense is going to end up being as problematic as many people expect it to be. I think it probably will end up being overblown. They'll be able to kind of operate in those lineups. They'll be able to put the ball in the basket. Tyler will be able to hit, catch, and shoot shots. Terry, as much as like Terry's looked at as like this on-ball player, he played a lot of off-ball last year as well. And when he was like really in a groove, like when he was playing well, a lot of that stuff was coming off spot ups and kind of off secondary attacks. So like, I really do believe with more time that could be figured out to be. Not, I'm not saying it's going to be a top 5 offense, but I think it could be serviceable with those 4 on the floor. Defensively, though, is where I think that's when the problem comes in. And honestly, like one of the answers Tyler gave, I asked him about just like the lineup with him and Terry, kind of them meshing. And the first thing he mentioned was like we are 2 smaller guards. Like he made sure to throw that out there. Like I don't think the problem is like, okay, we're gonna be sitting here saying these 2 guys, want to get up 24 shots a game, both of them, and they're not going to play together. I think the problem is going to be, well, they're going to be stuck switching at times. And the defense is going to be kind of like putting in a spot like it was a few years ago where it's over helping down low because they have a guy that's on a bigger guy and you're going to be put in a tough spot. So I think just big picture of looking at this, like I know the core thing here is offense. I think that is actually not going to be as big of a problem as we're saying. And then the decision becomes, the first kind of solution would be, do we need to change the 5th guy? Because I'm not saying automatically getting changed, but I think in their head, it's to like make the 4, I'm not even saying as starters, to make those lineups work. Do we have to put a Haywood in? Do we have to go bigger and ideally like hopefully lean into a guy like Kalel maybe and like play a little bit bigger so it make it work? And then the next thing would become after that, which is like probably the 3rd option, which is to start mixing in different lineups and just play bigger in general. So I think that's way down the line. That's like solutions that if really go south. But to answer your question, the offense stuff, I really do believe like just a lot of the stuff they're talking about. And Tyler, I know you guys talked about Tyler yesterday, but I thought it was like the stuff he was saying with Spo mentioned it first, and I was interested to see Tyler kind of expanded on it because Spo said Tyler worked on his body, he was working on the weights and everything, but specifically with his game, he was working on skills, and he worked on he said like a specific role for this team. That's what he kept saying. He worked on a specific role. And I feel like everybody's like, okay, what was that role? And when he came out in his presser and he said, I want to play more off ball, like I'm willing to play more off ball in these lineups. It's pretty clear that the role he was working on in the offseason was spot up shooting, secondary attacks, all the stuff. Cause he's like, I could still run pick and rolls. Like just because he's playing more off ball, he can't create, but that's clearly where it's heading. And that's the key to all of this. If he's playing in that role, there's no reason in the world why this lineup, this 4-man unit couldn't work.
Well, the idea is to out Duncan, right? I mean, we've been talking and I know that the lineup data doesn't always show this, but we've been talking for the past couple of years about how, this group looks, and Rozier was not part of it yet, but looks better with Duncan out there. So again, if you can do the things that Duncan does, then you can alleviate some of those concerns, because no matter what Duncan adds to his game, he's not going to be as natural a scorer, as skilled a scorer as Tyler Herro. Spoelstra always uses that word for Tyler, skilled. He's so skilled. He said it again yesterday. And I think that's the idea. The idea is, okay, we need the things that Duncan provides. You can do some of those things. Get us to 75% of that, because we need the other things that you're giving us. And especially if we don't really know, and we're going to play this interview from Duncan overnight, and you can hear for yourself what he says about his health, but we don't really know how Duncan's going to look on the court until we see it, because the last time we saw Duncan, he was broken down with a back problem. And he was not the player we saw in the first 2/3 of last season. So we'll have to see if he gets back to that. But it does feel like that. But after the break, I want to get into that idea of the 5th guy, because it feels like we are going to be talking about defense, and then we're going to be saying, well, they got to play Haywood there. And that could be the closing lineup. We've talked about that. But then they got to play Haywood there, and then does that change what this group looks like offensively? Because we know that even if Haywood adds some things, we're going to play an interview from him as well, even if he adds some things, for the most part, he's going to be standing in the corner with that group. He's not going to have the ball in his hands a whole lot. He's just going to be playing off of these other guys and playing off of their triggers. So we'll get into that in a second. I'll say this about the Rozier Herro backcourt. It would be a great college backcourt. Like, you look at the teams that advance like deep in the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying that to diminish it. I'm saying you look at the teams that advance, they have skilled backcourt players, both of whom can handle, are interchangeable. Size doesn't matter that much. In the NBA, though, you're putting a 6'7" guy with long arms at the 2 spot. That changes things. And they're switching everything, and they're taking you out of your game, and the deflections. But I mean, Rozier and Herro, like I would roll that one all the way to the Final Four. It's just what this is going to look like in the NBA. You look at me, Alex, like I'm saying that I'm not meaning that as demeaning. I'm saying like right? Like
It's
Jameer
funny,
Nelson and Delonte West. No, I mean like
you're right. You're right.
Right? It would be an elite college backcourt. Elite, but we're in the
You're
pros.
telling Tyler and Terry to go back to college and maybe it'll work there. I totally get it. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, here you're seeing Derek White and Drew Holiday defensively. It's a little bit different than what you're facing, in the NCAA tournament. Anyway, I do want to tell you about a great sponsor, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Speaking of something different, we have a new sponsor of our post-game show. They're called the Real Estate Shop. You're going to be hearing about them when we do our Defending the House segment because, of course, this organization, as much as we talk offense, is probably going to be leaning defense again. The Real Estate Shop is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin, and what they do is help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're honest, approachable, and smart, nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, and they've got a proven on-market strategy to help sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame, and they can do that because of their deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. 3 different places here. Instagram, the Fort Lauderdale Realtor. Again, that's the Fort Lauderdale Realtor. You can call them at 954-268-9812. That's 954-268-9812. Or check them out at Real Estate Shop. That's with 2 P's and an E. RealEstateShopFL.com. So let's get to that because I this idea of the fifth guy, because this is called 5 on the floor, not 4 on the floor, although Brady did use 4 on the floor earlier. They're going to have to play a 5th person. Jovic sat down with us, and we'll play this interview, and he seems to acknowledge that with that group, he's not going to be running a whole bunch of pick and rolls at the top or pushing the tempo necessarily. He's going to be spotting up. Last year, he's about 40% from 3. Highsmith has talked about adding some things to his game. But ultimately, we know with that group, as I said, he's probably going to be standing in the corner to try to make threes. And I asked him about being a rhythm shooter, and he does think the more shots he gets up, the better he feels from out there. And then there's Jaquez, who's the wild card in all of this. And I spoke to him today, and he said he likes coming off the bench. He likes it. He liked the role. I think we didn't get this into it, but I think he likes being able to kind of see how things are developing, and then he can mismatch hunt when he comes in. And we know his energy, that sometimes his energy is going to be faster than the starters, when he comes into the game. I asked him if he'd actually thought about 6th man of the year. He said he hadn't. I can tell you, Jaquez is in the top 10 in a lot of the betting lines for 6th man of the year this year. So other people are paying attention to that. It's a good long shot bet if you want to play it. I guess the question is this: how much do all 3 of these guys, Alex, help with this? Because I do still feel like Bam and Jimmy are still. Bam's still going to be going. Jimmy's going to go for his spots. Bam's going to be going for the foul line stuff. We know Tyler's going to be trying to get in for the floater. Terry's going to play in between game also. Like, is there any 5th player that'll make this easier on them?
Well, I mean, the obvious one is Haywood, right? I think he's just the guy who is naturally, probably like the lowest maintenance, right? In the sense that he's very much used to just kind of lowish volume, wide open threes, right? And just playing a role on the defensive end. And, he's talked about his playmaking, and you'll hear this in the interview that we drop, but I think that comes out of just making the right read. It's not that you're going to see him running pick and rolls or anything like that, right? He just, will attack a closeout and then make the right read from there. And I actually think he's already pretty good at that. I thought he's one of those where he'll make the right pass, and then he also added the floater. So these little things have helped Haywood a lot, and I think him continuing to polish in that role, like polish these skills, is how he gets better. So, excuse me, he's easily like the easiest fit in my opinion there. But I have no issue with Jovic being that guy just because of the way that he played towards the end of last season, where he stepped his defense up. He was hitting shots. He was playing his game connector. The only thing I will say is talking about there is it's going to be even lower volume now. And like you said, Ethan, he acknowledged that he is sort of a rhythm shooter. And it's like that for a lot of people. It's not easy for anybody to just be like, oh, I'm not exactly sure when the shots are going to be there, how many I'll be getting, right? And just be a high rate shooter. It's not easy. It's not, right? Because it's kind of inconsistent. It's not like you know exactly when you're going to get the shot and how many you're going to get if you're going to be playing next to Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam. Like, they'll do the creating, right? And he'll do his thing. He'll do the right thing and either take the shot or attack a closeout. And like I said about Haywood, Jovic is more than willing to make the extra pass and skip it to the big or skip it to the 3, like whatever's got to be done. So I think he can play that role as long as the defense it holds up the way it was at the end of last season. But I think what can happen is the shooting might vary a little bit because of that, because of the lower volume, and maybe some nights he's taking 2 threes a game and it just has a quiet night offensively. But it's just going to be sort of a downsized role if that is the starting lineup.
Would that be the easiest play there? Because most people would say, well, of them, Haywood's the least accomplished, probably. I mean, the least skilled offensively between him, Hawkes, and Jovic, right? That's fair. He's also the most skilled defensively.
I would say it's Jovic, and the reason I say that is because I don't think, first of all, I'm thinking defensively right now, and I don't think the way to really shore up Terry and Tyler specifically is Haywood, because I think they need more length to make it work defensively. I don't think it's as simple as putting in one of their best defenders and it's going to make that work, because if you put in Haywood with Bam, you're pretty much saying to yourself you're going to do a lot of switching and you're still getting back to the same place. Just because you put an extra good defender, that player that Haywood's guarding that switches onto is going to be out of the play. But then there's two other guys that are going to attack.
It's point of attack, and then you got to have Terry and Tyler on mismatches, basically.
And then
which is what we saw with Kyle so often, where Kyle was basically stuck underneath the basket.
And look, and maybe in that case you go a little more zone so you can lean into that. But I'll say this: I think there's more of an opportunity when you go into these other lineups with Jovic, because if he does make the jump defensively, and I'm not saying jump meaning major leap, I'm saying the leap that he made last year, just gradual improvement where he's able to hold his ground one-on-one, while also just showing in the lane and just being kind of like a lengthy good defender. That matters more to me probably than the Haywood thing. So I think ideally, and look, I'm reading into everything. I'm sitting here reading into these training camp videos that the Heat are posting. I'm sitting here looking at the lineups. They're literally running the Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, Jovic, Bam lineup, in all the videos they were posting today. That seems like they're just fully, I'm not used to them putting this out. They're usually really hold their cards close to their chest kind of team. They don't usually put this out. So this is kind of weird for us. So media day, they say the lineup essentially. Training camp, they're just showing the lineup. It almost makes you think that they do the opposite, because they're so clearly pushing this that maybe Terry and Tyler are coming off the bench.
But I think there are reasons that they're pushing this. I'm not going to call it optics. I'm not going to call it optics, but I feel like to a certain degree it is to shut people up, because they've heard this whole offseason, right? Terry and Tyler can't work together. So why did you acquire Terry when you have Tyler, right? Does that mean they're still going to be together? They're making $53 million between them. Okay. And it's from that perspective alone, just salary slot. It's odd to have one of them coming off the bench, even if it might make sense to have one of them coming off the bench. And we've discussed that a lot as far as what comes with Duncan here. I also think
that's why it surprised me though, hearing when they were saying they have two current starters, because then it opens it up for everybody else to kind of critique. So when it ends up being this lineup,
I was surprised.
It kind of pushes it that way anyway.
Well, no, I was surprised because I got it from two people inside the organization who volunteered it to me that they had two starting spots secured. So it wasn't like I made that up out of thin air. But we were pushing that, and it almost does feel like saying we have four starters is pushback against that. It wouldn't be the first time, by the way. But again, that call was coming from inside the house. Okay,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't just made up. It's not our speculation. It's not us saying. I was told by two different people who kind of would know. Okay, we have two definitive starters, and the other thing is there's a timeline issue here too. I don't know if conversations occurred with the players after that, and Erik then decided after speaking to them, listen, I can make this work and I'm going to try to make this work. But I think to a certain degree, I think they may just be trying to empower them and saying to Terry and Tyler, listen, you've heard the whole offseason, this is going to work. So make it work. Make it work. We're going to throw you out there and you're going to make it work. We know Bam and Jimmy are going to start. They're the two obvious starters, but go out there and make it work. And we'll rotate the fifth guy.
Isn't that making
whether it's Highsmith? I think so. Too well, and it gets them to sort of bond during this training camp and try to figure things out together. I mean, I'd love to do an interview with them together, because I think ultimately the success of the offense, I think, does depend on the two of them. Because I think Jimmy and Bam at this stage, we've seen 5 years of this. Like, I don't think either of them is going to change all that much. We can talk about Bam extending his range, maybe Jimmy playing a little bit faster. There are things that they can do, but ultimately,
Also
like,
seen in
they're
the
fully
training camp
formed.
video. I just
Right.
wanted to point that out. Bam spacing in the corner, Jimmy driving. We've had 6 months of no
Lead
basketball.
offense.
We're finding every little crease
We're
of
jonesing.
basketball
We're
content.
jonesing for trading camp videos on Instagram, which again, they don't show us anything. We walk in and they're just bouncing the ball, but they're showing us what they want to show us. Okay, and that's typically the way that this works. And I do think that with Tyler and Terry, a lot of this is okay. You're the 2 highest paid guards on the team. Figure it out. Like, you both have skills as scorers, and they want to see if this thing can work. But I am dubious about the defense. I'm with you on that. Like, I think it's really tough because, if you don't play Highsmith and you play Jovic, like, you're really counting on Jovic to take another step defensively. And he took a huge step last year. Like, I don't know what the next step is for him in this shorter time frame. Alex.
I will say one quick thing about what I was saying before with the lineup data and those 4 together. Another reason that that small sample size is just so unreliable as data is because you look at the shooting right in those 118 minutes. The Heat shot it 43% from 3 in those minutes, but also so did their opponents. I think it was at 41 or 42. So there's shooting luck there, and you would have to sort of average it out to what it would be normally, right? So the defensive rating is probably not as bad as it shows, in those minutes, but the offense, same thing. They shot 43% from 3. So that's why it's so tough that we just really didn't get to see a sample, because you can't really use any of this stuff. So it's cool that it's encouraging that offensive rating was much higher, but what happens when the 3 isn't falling, right? It's the difference probably isn't as big. Same thing for their defense. So I want to make it sound like that is more important, actually getting a sample right and getting to watch, because we have to see how they play together. We just haven't seen it yet, and we literally haven't seen it with Jovic. So all of this is stuff that we haven't seen, and I think I want to see how Jovic responds to it, and I really would love to see him punish mismatches, right? He's been talking about. I think that would be a huge, right, in sort of back to that thought process of how do you get some shots if all these guys are going to be doing most of the creation. You can the mismatch punishing, that's a great way to add easy points and just take advantage. It doesn't only have to be in post-ups either. You can screen and roll. You can cut off the ball when the space calls for it. I think there's a lot of ways he can take advantage. If he can just get used to scoring over guys that are smaller than him down there for those easy ones, I think that would help quite a lot, because he's got the shooting, he's got the passing, and the defense has gotten better.
I also think the thing that this does, if they're going to lean into those 5 as starters, is it does allow the bench guys to get settled with their roles. So it would seem then that Duncan, Jaquez, and Highsmith are automatics, right? Those 3 are automatics. And Josh, because of the delay in him getting back, it's still working through the shoulder, is off to the side here a little bit, and probably the 9th guy is Love. And so it's likely Love, Highsmith, Jaquez, and Duncan. And even though Jaquez is in his second year, there's a high level of basketball IQ with those 4 players, where I feel like one of the things that the Spo will lean into is goes with a 9. I know people are gonna say Khalil Ware. I don't think it's gonna be Ware coming out of camp. So I think it's those 4 guys, and then it's essentially Jimmy runs with them at times. Sometimes Terry runs with them, or maybe it's even Bam running with them, although I think less of that. Does that make sense, Brady, before we close? It feels like he's going to try to establish a core bench group, and those 4 guys, there is rhyme and reason to that, I think, because we know Jaquez plays well with Duncan, and Highsmith kind of plugs the hole there defensively, and then you could run Jimmy with that group, and you have Jimmy playing with Love, which is something I know we've talked about, pairing the 2 of them together.
I don't know how much of a fan I am of the Jimmy with the 4 bench unit this season, consistent this one specifically. part of it is Jaime, and I don't want to keep sounding like I'm like Jaime and Jimmy can't play together because they have played off each other well in the minutes they played last year. But I think in the way they're looking at it, they want Jaime to kind of take the reins of a lineup. They want him to take the reins of a second unit, the kind of stuff that the popping of being that ball of energy that it feels like you need. I keep pushing the Terry thing, but I don't think it has to be him. I think they could mix it up. Look, if you want to get really weird and force these 4 players to play together, Nico with that with that bench and him kind of running the point guard in certain lineups, I think could work as well. Like him kind of being staggered a bit and playing with some of those guys. And as well, they could do the thing where they do 2 and 2, which is probably where they're going to end up landing, which makes it a little bit tougher because I know Spo likes doing the 4 guys off the bench and bringing them in. And if you do the 2 mix and match, it kind of hurts that a little bit. But I do think there are ways of working that, just kind of pulling a guy out early. Let's just say it's pull Tyler out immediately and bring in Duncan. And then all of a sudden you work it back around and Tyler can run with the second unit with Jaime and them. And then you could put in Jimmy a little bit later. Like there's ways to mix it in where it's not always just the 4 bench with 1 guy and then the starters. Because at that point, that's how things get stale. Like we talk about things getting stale. I think the part of it is over a long period of time when you're playing a similar rotation and the regular, especially with this team in the depth, I think it's more about mixing it up a little bit more and trying to find combinations that work. And that's what they're doing in camp right now. They're trying to find different things. But in the regular season, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in a different type of just combinations in general. But I do want Jaime to run his own lineup probably separate from Jimmy. I think that's kind of my main of where I'm landing in general is just because I think he just operates in similar spots. Like we talk about Terry and Tyler and Bam operating in his spots. I feel like Jaime benefits more when he can kind of play his own game and he can work that mid post. And he's put himself in a position for more reps on the ball. He's put himself in a position for more shots in general, like all of that stuff that's leading into it. So you give that guy that opportunity and let him kind of find his way off the bench. And look, if it doesn't work, if Miami's way over their head with it and this guy's not ready, which I definitely don't expect to be the case, but let's just say it does happen, then you could work in different lineups with Jimmy in general and kind of dial it back a little bit.
All right. Well, we discussed a lot of this with the players. So just a preview, I actually asked Jaquez the question about running his own unit. So that'll be part of the interview that we run later in the week. So again, check out all the interviews we're going to be putting up. We will be mixing in analysis episodes intermittently, but we like to get you interviews this time of year. So first one that we're going to run out there is Duncan with Highsmith. I don't know if we're going to pair these necessarily, but they're kind of going for the same spot, or feels like trying to get the same kind of attention. Sear Little, Josh Christopher. Also did a kind of a fun sit down with Jay Rich, which turned into a lot of talk about DJing and snowboarding and all that. But it's an entertaining listen, and he gets into his career as well. We had Kashad Johnson and Pelle Larson together, which was fun. I will say that's the first time I've talked to Larson. And we've talked to Kashad, and he was great the first time we had him. He's a bright kid. Like I feel like as he gets more comfortable, you're going to be hearing a lot more from him. Also, we talked to Kalel Ware. We'll be posting that interview at some point as well. Nikola Jovic, I had a good time talking to him. And then Jaquez and Love I spoke to today, and I'll try to get Terry Rozier for a few minutes and maybe even Tyler Herro before we leave town. So we'll have all of that here on the feed. Thanks to Alex. Thanks to Brady. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Water Cleanup in Florida, WCUFL.com, YouBreakWillFix.com, Real Estate Shop, FL.com. If you want to sponsor 5 on the Floor, we don't have many spots left. Let us know soon. Have a good day, everybody.